Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is, well, it's a big one.
It really is.
Yeah, we are unpacking the updated and expanded edition of Tom Nichols' book. It's this comprehensive exploration called The Death of Expertise.
Right.
And we are going to explore this really strange, almost funny but terrifying paradox that defines modern life. I mean, you live in an era where you have more access to information than any other generation in human history.
Literally sitting right there in your pocket.
Exactly. It's right in your pocket. Yet simultaneously, we're witnessing this global, really aggressive rejection of established knowledge.
It is a remarkable and, frankly, deeply concerning contradiction. The source material we're diving into today is this thorough examination of how the internet, the evolution of higher ed, and just the fundamental mechanics of human psychology have basically combined.
Yeah.
They've created this culture where everyone assumes they're the smartest person in the room. It's a look at why the foundational relationship between professionals and lay people is fracturing, and why that fracture threatens the stability of any complex society.
And you actually get a sense of that danger mixed with a really healthy dose of dark humor just from looking at the cover of the book itself.
Oh, the cover's brilliant.
It's so good. It's plastered with these faux internet comment bubbles that perfectly capture the aesthetic of modern online discourse. You've got this one user named WikiGenius complaining, that's not how you spell expertise.
Completely oblivious to their own spelling errors.
Right. And then there's another comment from Vax3 Warrior shouting, do your own research, people.
It absolutely sets the tone. It highlights that very specific blend of hilarity and genuine societal risk.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, it's really easy to laugh at the irony of someone confidently misusing words in a public forum. But on the other hand, when the mantra of doing your own research entirely replaces trusting actual medical or scientific professionals.
The consequences are severe.
Exactly. That cover art captures the exact attitude of unearned arrogance that we really need to dissect today.
Okay, let's unpack this. How exactly did we get to a point where the average person feels completely confident arguing with a seasoned professional?
It's a great question.
Where did this cultural assumption originate that a quick web search is somehow equivalent to a medical degree or, a doctorate in international relations?
It fundamentally stems from a profound public confusion about the concept of equality. People are increasingly confusing democratic equality with intellectual equality.
Which are two very different things.
Completely different. Democratic equality is the foundational idea that we all have equal rights under the law and an equal vote in our political system.
Right.
Intellectual equality is the false notion that everyone possesses equal knowledge. In a functioning democracy, your fundamental rights are exactly the same as mine. But that does not mean your opinion on a highly complex, specialized subject carries the same weight as the established facts presented by someone who has studied that specific subject for decades.
There is a really striking geopolitical example used in the book to illustrate this disconnect. Back in 2014, when Russia first invaded the Crimean Peninsula, a poll was taken about whether the United States should engage in military intervention in Ukraine.
The findings on this were just staggering.
They really were. 1 in 6 Americans couldn't even find Ukraine on a map. The median respondent was off by about 1,800 miles.
1,800 miles.
Yeah. But the truly unsettling part wasn't the lack of geographic knowledge. It was that the least informed people, the ones who thought Ukraine was located in, Latin America or Australia,
Were the most enthusiastic about deploying the military. And that enthusiasm, in the face of absolute ignorance, is the precise definition of the death of expertise. It's not just that people lack factual knowledge, it's that their lack of knowledge doesn't trigger any internal hesitation before they offer a very strong, aggressive opinion on what should be done.
And when this translates to real-world policy or public health, it ceases to be a harmless quirk of human nature. Look at what happened in South Africa with former President Thabo Mbeki in the late 90s and early 2000s.
A truly tragic example.
He embraced AIDS denialism at the state level. He rejected the global medical consensus that HIV causes AIDS and instead argued it was caused by other factors like poverty and malnourishment.
Right.
Because of this personal conviction, he refused to distribute life-saving antiretroviral drugs through the public health system. Harvard researchers later estimated that this specific rejection of expertise cost over 300,000 lives.
It's devastating.
It is historical proof of what happens when leadership substitutes amateur intuition for established science.
It is a sobering reminder of the stakes. And it brings us to a critical question. What actually makes someone an expert? True expertise isn't just someone who claims to have read a lot of articles.
No.
It is a highly specific combination of formal education, natural talent, years of practical experience, and crucially, peer affirmation.
Peer affirmation is key.
Absolutely. Experts are constantly evaluated, challenged, and certified by other experts in their field. That self-policing community, the rigorous peer review process, is what sets a professional apart from an enthusiastic hobbyist.
But our culture loves the enthusiastic hobbyist. Think about the narratives we consume. We love the fantasy of the scrappy, self-taught amateur outsmarting the highly educated elite.
We really do.
One of the best examples is the famous bar scene in the movie Good Will Hunting. You have Matt Damon's character, a janitor who is a secret mathematical genius, completely dismantling a smug, ponytailed Ivy League grad student by reciting obscure historical texts.
It's a great scene.
It's amazing. We cheer for the janitor because we desperately want to believe that you can drop $1.50 in late charges at the public library and magically bypass the grueling work of formal education.
We do love that narrative. It's deeply embedded in the American ethos of the self-made individual. But it is largely a myth. Real expertise cannot be gained just by passively absorbing a stack of books, because comprehension is not the same as analysis.
Right.
Reading a text doesn't teach you how to weigh competing methodologies or spot flawed data.
But hold on, isn't a healthy dose of skepticism a good thing? If you look at history, experts have been spectacularly wrong.
That's true.
Opponents of established knowledge constantly point to the thalidomide tragedy in the mid-20th century, where a drug prescribed by doctors caused horrendous birth defects before the medical community realized the danger.
Yes.
If experts caused that, why shouldn't the average person double-check their doctor's advice online? Where's the line between healthy skepticism and dangerous arrogance?
That is the exact friction point we're dealing with today. The line is drawn at understanding probability versus demanding perfection. Yes, experts can be wrong, and when they are, the results can be tragic. But they are statistically far less likely to be wrong than a layperson.
Why is that?
Because, as the physicist Werner Heisenberg once noted, an expert is someone who knows some of the worst mistakes that can be made in their subject and how to avoid them. For every thalidomide tragedy, there are thousands of safely tested drugs that save millions of lives daily. Expecting absolute perfection from experts is unrealistic. Completely rejecting the scientific method because it isn't flawless is entirely illogical.
It's wild to think that someone would dismiss a doctor's advice because of a single historical anomaly like thalidomide. But what is actually happening in our brains when we do that? Why are we so desperate to hold on to the 1% chance the expert is wrong?
That brings us to the underlying psychology. We have to look at how the human brain evaluates its own competence. Research psychologists at Cornell University conducted studies showing a cognitive blind spot known as the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Ah, yes.
The core finding is that the less competent someone is at a specific task, the more confident they are in their abilities.
The results of that Cornell study are actually quite unsettling when you think about the daily implications. The researchers asked people if they were familiar with certain concepts from physics and biology, but they mixed in completely made-up, fictitious terms like plates of parallax.
Plates of parallax.
Completely fake. And roughly 90% of the respondents claimed they had some working knowledge of these entirely fake concepts. The less they actually knew about the real science, the more likely they were to claim they understood the fake science.
What's fascinating here is understanding why that happens. The researchers found that incompetent people lack a skill called metacognition.
Metacognition.
Metacognition is essentially the ability to step back, look at your own thought process, and realize when you are making an error. Now, how do we usually build metacognition? We build it through repeated failure, rigorous testing, and harsh peer feedback.
Right.
If you strip away the feedback loop, say by just reading a Wikipedia page in isolation, you never develop the muscle to know when you are wrong. You substitute pure confidence for actual competence.
And once that unearned confidence is locked in, our brains actively work to protect our egos. We deploy confirmation bias, which is our natural tendency to accept only the evidence that confirms what we already believe, while completely dismissing any facts that challenge us. We remember the hits, and we conveniently forget the misses.
Precisely. And this is heavily compounded by another human flaw in numeracy.
The numeracy.
Which is a fundamental inability to comprehend mathematics and risk. Think about Dustin Hoffman's character, Ray, in the movie Rain Man. He is absolutely terrified of flying because his savant memory has logged the date and death toll of every single catastrophic airline crash in history.
He remembers all the bad stuff.
Exactly. He ignores the massive statistical evidence that flying is incredibly safe, focusing entirely on the terrifying exceptions, and refuses to fly anything but Qantas because they've never crashed.
It perfectly captures how people misunderstand probability. When a public health official states that a vaccine is 99.9% safe, the innumerate citizen focuses entirely on the 0.1%, utterly convinced that they or their child will be the unlucky exception.
Right.
Our brains are biologically wired to fixate on the dramatic, highly unlikely threat, rather than calmly calculating statistical probability.
And when you combine a lack of metacognition, aggressive confirmation bias, and a poor grasp of statistics, you create fertile ground for something even more disruptive to the concept of expertise:
Conspiracy theories.
the rapid spread of conspiracy theories.
The text touches on how these theories have really exploded into the mainstream. Just to be clear to you listening, specific politically charged examples like the QAnon movement or the belief that anti-vaccine tracking chips exist are used here purely as sociological examples.
We aren't taking sides here.
Right, we're not endorsing or attacking any political viewpoints. We're impartially exploring how these phenomena demonstrate the public's rejection of established facts. These theories appeal heavily to narcissism. They make people feel like they possess secret, esoteric knowledge that the average person doesn't have. But why are people so drawn to these narratives in the first place?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, conspiracy theories are actually a deeply human psychological defense mechanism. When a society goes through an epic, collectively felt trauma, a global pandemic, a sudden economic collapse, a major terrorist attack, people cast about for an explanation that matches the scale of the event.
That makes sense.
The idea that a virus just mutated randomly in nature, or that a lone, disorganized gunman altered the course of history, is existentially terrifying. It implies the universe is chaotic and out of our control. A conspiracy theory, however, offers a strangely comforting alternative. It means someone, somewhere, is in control, even if that someone is malicious.
And people will completely abandon foundational logic to maintain that psychological comfort. Look at Occam's razor, the law of parsimony, which states that the simplest explanation, the one requiring the fewest assumptions, is usually the correct one. Conspiracy theorists do the exact opposite.
They really do.
They create overwhelmingly complex, contradictory webs of narrative that would require the flawless cooperation of thousands of people.
And what makes engaging with these theories so exhausting for actual experts is that the theorists manipulate the absence of evidence as proof.
Oh, this is the worst part.
If an investigator says there is no evidence of a massive cover-up, the conspiracy theorist replies, exactly. That proves how deep, powerful, and effective the cover-up really is. It creates a non-falsifiable loop. Every contradiction or lack of evidence only strengthens their belief that the establishment is lying to them.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you would think that the ultimate cure for this kind of flawed, biased thinking would be higher education.
You would hope so.
You would assume that going to college would beat the confirmation bias right out of you. But the argument here is that the modern college experience is actually exacerbating the problem.
The commodification of higher education is a critical factor in the death of expertise. Historically, the university was an exclusive, highly rigorous environment that demanded self-discipline, critical thinking, and a willingness to be intellectually uncomfortable.
Right.
Today, due to an insatiable cultural demand for degrees and the massive influx of tuition dollars, that dynamic has shifted. Many students are no longer treated as junior scholars. They are treated as valued clients. And as any basic business model dictates, the customer is always right.
You see this clearly with the reality of grade inflation and the evolution of safe spaces. The gentleman's C, which used to be the default grade for just showing up and doing the bare minimum, has been largely replaced by the gentleman's A's.
Yeah.
Students increasingly expect high grades simply for completing the transaction of paying tuition, and they expect to be entirely comfortable while doing it. Look at the well-documented Yale Halloween costume incident from several years ago.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
A student was filmed literally screaming at a professor over an email about Halloween costumes, yelling, "It is not about creating an intellectual space. It's about creating a home here."
That incident perfectly encapsulates how the modern university often infantilizes its student body. When the primary operational goal of a university shifts from challenging a student's worldview to validating their feelings and ensuring their emotional comfort, true education ceases to happen.
Emotion becomes an unassailable defense against empirical facts.
Exactly.
But it's easy to just blame kids these days for wanting safe spaces or complain about oversensitive college students. Isn't there a larger systemic issue here? How much of this is driven by the sheer financial realities of running a modern university, where massive tuition fees are the primary lifeblood of the institution?
You hit the nail on the head. This isn't just about generational shifts in temperament. It is a structural economic issue. Universities are trapped in a financial model where they rely heavily on student tuition, often funded by massive federal loans.
Right.
To keep that money flowing, they have to attract and retain students at all costs. They build luxury dorms, lazy rivers, and expansive student life centers. They cannot afford to fail students or make them so intellectually uncomfortable that they drop out or transfer. The financial reality forces the institution to prioritize satisfaction over rigor.
And it's an industry-wide problem. The very word college is losing its distinct meaning. Small regional colleges are desperately rebranding themselves as universities just to attract more of those tuition dollars.
Yeah.
They're throwing together low-quality graduate degrees and doctoral programs just to seem prestigious, creating this massive academic arms race.
This raises an important question. What is the actual value of these degrees? When small, underfunded colleges masquerade as major research universities, they dilute the meaning of academic credentials across the board. If everyone possesses a master's degree, the credential no longer signals exceptional achievement, rigorous testing, or deep expertise. It merely signals that the person successfully navigated an expensive bureaucratic system for a few years.
So when everyone gets a degree, and the grades are artificially inflated to keep the tuition-paying clients happy, what happens when they graduate?
The result is that graduates walk out into the real world with a highly dangerous combination of deep intellectual insecurity and unearned arrogance. They possess a physical piece of paper that tells them they are highly educated, so they are fully convinced they are the intellectual peers of leading scholars and seasoned professionals.
So they haven't actually been challenged.
Right. Because they haven't actually been rigorously challenged or forced to defend their ideas against harsh critique, they lack the real-world critical thinking skills required to evaluate complex information.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the ultimate enabler of all this unearned arrogance: the internet.
Oh, absolutely.
The internet didn't start the death of expertise, but it heavily accelerated it. We have to talk about Sturgeon's law, named after science fiction writer Theodore Sturgeon. He famously observed that 90% of everything is crap.
It's a great law.
On the modern internet, that percentage might actually be a vast underestimation.
The internet is undeniably a magnificent repository of human knowledge, but it is also an unmoderated, chaotic echo chamber of misinformation. It operates purely as a delivery vessel, not a referee.
It doesn't care what's true.
It gives the exact same visual weight, the same slick formatting, to a peer-reviewed medical journal as it does to a basement blogger's unhinged conspiracy theories. To the untrained eye, they look equally valid.
And people completely confuse the act of finding a web page with actually doing research. There was a fascinating study done at Yale proving this exact phenomenon. Researchers had participants use a search engine to answer questions, while a control group was given printed texts.
I remember this study.
They found that simply the act of using a search engine gives people an artificially inflated sense of how much they actually know. The people who searched the internet felt smarter and more confident about their knowledge, even on topics completely unrelated to what they just searched.
It's wild.
They confused the sheer presence of a brightly colored website with the plausibility of a scientific argument. Searching is not researching, but the interface makes us feel like it is.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that specific illusion of competence is aggressively monetized by celebrities and influencers who peddle pseudoscience. They leverage their massive platforms and parasocial relationships to bypass established medical or scientific consensus, offering the quick, appealing, aesthetic answers that lay people crave.
A perfect example is the actress Gwyneth Paltrow and her lifestyle website, GOOP. The site was actually recommending that women practice vaginal steaming using an herb called mugwort to somehow balance their hormones.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Yes. And you have actual board-certified gynecologists, like Dr. Jen Gunter, taking to the internet and practically begging women not to do this, thoroughly explaining the very real medical dangers and the complete lack of clinical evidence.
But people listen to the celebrity.
Because the celebrity presents it beautifully, and because people are naturally skeptical of doctors telling them clinical truths they don't want to hear, The pseudoscience thrives.
Which highlights the absolute impossibility of fact-checking our way out of this online crisis. You cannot debunk your way to a more informed public.
You really can't.
There is a story of a Washington Post columnist who ran a weekly feature detailing what was fake on the internet. She painstakingly researched and debunked viral hoaxes, but she eventually gave up and ended the column.
Why did she stop?
Because she realized that cognitive bias is so overwhelmingly strong that people will only consume information that validates their pre-existing worldview. Even if a story is demonstrably, provably fake, if it aligns with what a person wants to believe, no amount of rigorous fact-checking will change their mind. The facts simply bounce off the armor of their confirmation bias.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. For you listening, the core takeaways from our deep dive into these sources are crucial to understanding the world we are living in right now.
They absolutely are.
The death of expertise isn't just about people lacking facts or failing a geography quiz. It is an aggressive, somewhat narcissistic hostility toward established knowledge. It is fueled by our own flawed, biased psychology. It's nurtured by a commodified higher education system that treats students like fragile customers. And it is weaponized by an unmoderated echo chamber that values engagement and clicks over objective truth.
And you should care about this deeply because our entire modern civilization relies on a deeply interconnected web of specialized trust. You do not have the time or the capacity to master the aerodynamics required to build the airplanes you fly in, or the pharmacology of the antibiotics you take, or the complex metallurgy of the bridges you drive over every day.
Right, we can't do it all ourselves.
We rely on experts to handle the staggering, invisible complexity of modern life. The moment you start crowdsourcing your public health policy or your civil engineering standards to internet comment sections, that web snaps. Society doesn't just become annoying, it breaks down into isolated islands of incoherence and suspicion. We prosper because we specialize, and we survive because we trust the specialists.
As you navigate today's endless sea of information, consider this. As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly adept at perfectly mimicking the tone, the vocabulary, and the formatting of absolute certainty, how will we be able to tell the difference between a true expert and a machine designed to simply tell us exactly what our confirmation bias wants to hear?
That is the big question.
If we have already trained ourselves to reject human expertise in favor of whatever sounds the most confident, are we perfectly primed to hand our reality over to an algorithm?
It is a profound vulnerability and perhaps the ultimate test for the future of any free, information-based society.
It really is. Thank you for joining this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.